really is an honor to be here, and I'm afraid, I don't know if there was ample caffeine in there for everyone to make it for the after lunch session. Dr. Lee, thank you for allowing me to be here, and thank you for doing this. And who is from Yoido Church here? I know, who else? A few of you? Okay. I want to say thank you to your church. I took a pilgrimage to Seoul in the late 80s, and it was so inspirational seeing, I don't remember the teachings, but I remember leaving with, wow, we can impact a city and a nation. And your church and your team, you have inspired the world to think bigger, and to not just think bigger, dream bigger, and do something that has a huge impact instead of a tiny impact. And I thank you for that. And I thank God for your church. And I also, I'm really grateful, and I hope all of us can learn from the Korean church. I don't go to it seems like every city I go to, there's Korean missionaries. I don't know if there's any place where Korean missionaries have not gone. And it seems like there is such a passion to reach the world and to finance and to do all the things it takes to do that. So I honor you for that. And Pastor Hong Sing and Full Gospel Tabernacle and Jeremiah, wherever Jeremiah went over there, and Pastor Vincent and Glad Tidings, thank you for hosting this. And I know it's a lot of work, probably more work for your team. But thank you. A lot of work and money goes into it. This is a conference about Asians reaching Asia. So I was puzzled why I'm here, because I'm not an Asian, in case you didn't notice. But I have lived here most of my life. As Pastor said, my wife and I first went to the Philippines in 1984 for what was supposed to be a 1-month summer mission trip. After 1 month, we stayed an extra month. Actually, what we were doing, our team, we had 65 American college students, and they were going to spend their summer doing 1 month of mission work in the Philippines and 1 month in Seoul. And we did evangelism among college students. And so when the team left after 1 month in Manila and the team flew to Seoul, my wife and I stayed behind. There were so many young people came to Christ, we felt we could not go to Seoul, we had to stay. So we were left behind, the team left, and I thought about writing my memoirs one day and calling it Left Behind. I think it would be a good title for a book that could really have a large audience. So I'm thinking of copywriting that title and trademarking it for my story, but maybe a movie too. But so the team went on to Seoul, we stayed in Manila. So it was 1 month turned into 2 months, and then 2 months turned into 6 months, and then 6 months turned into 6 years, and now we're celebrating 32 years of our church this year. And it really has been a privilege to serve in this part of the world. I really count it an honor. I've really never seen myself or called myself a missionary. I'm a church planter, and that's what my wife and I did. And we came to the Philippines to start a church, but we stayed to train Filipinos to reach Asia. It was the reason we stayed. The Lord showed me right from the beginning that the people I was reaching would go all over the world. Our church was very poor, as most of the nation was poor. But the first thing we did in our church, we were in the basement of a movie theater, and the first thing we did was put a world map on the wall. And when our church were mostly teenagers, and they would come into church, and we taught them to lay hands on the world map, and according to Psalm 2:8, ask God for the nations as your inheritance. And most of these people had never been off of the island. Nobody in their family had ever owned a car. Many of them had never been inside of an air-conditioned building. And our church was not air-conditioned. We were in the basement. It was very hot. But they would pray for the nations. And people started getting passports, and they started going to the nations.
and God did something pretty amazing. Before I share the word I was asked to do today, I want to do something I always do when I'm not in my church, and I want to introduce my family to you. I brought them with me. They're right there. My wife and I, Deborah, in the striped shirt, she's speaking today at a retreat in Manila with a bunch of pastors' wives, so she could not be with me. But we are celebrating, on Friday is our anniversary. We are celebrating 66 years of marriage. 66 years of marriage. I've been married to her for 33 years, and she's been married to me for 33 years. So, 66 years of marriage. Okay? We have 3 sons. Our sons were all born in the Philippines and lived there their whole lives until they went to college in America. My oldest son, William, is on the front. He is a PhD student, and he lectures at Vanderbilt University on Islamic history. He's finishing his PhD in Islamic history, and he gets to have really wonderful gospel conversations. He knows more about Islamic history and the Quran than many people in this nation. And God is using him tremendously. His wife, Rachel, is my executive assistant. And their daughter, my first granddaughter, Josephine, you may not know it, but she is the center of the universe. Okay? And she has her mother's blue eyes and her father's energy. And my 2 other sons on the right with the beard is James. James writes music. He's a Nashville songwriter. He writes a lot of worship music that is sung all over the world, but he's a businessman. He's an entrepreneur, owns his own business. And his brother, Jonathan, my youngest, is his brother's business partner. Jonathan, they are serial entrepreneurs. They're doing quite well. They're very generous. And then Jonathan, my youngest, his wife, Mariah, her grandparents moved to America from the Philippines, and she was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, in the States. And so my son is a white Filipino, and his wife is a brown American. It's a cross-cultural marriage. And I introduced my family for this reason. It is common for people like us to get confused about who we are and what we do. What I do, I preach, I train pastors, I plant churches, but that's not who I am. It's just what I do. That's who I am. Who you are is rooted in your family. And no matter how big your church grows, and no matter how many acclaims and degrees and all the things that go with ministry, there's nothing more important than that. I get to work, our ministry is working in over 80 nations around the world, but nothing excites me more than that. The most thrilling part of my day is turning on worship music with my granddaughter. She's 19 months old now, and worshiping Jesus with her. The most thrilling part of my day is Skyping my sons and hearing how their business went today. There's nothing better than that. I love ministry, but that's just what I do. And listen, no amount of failure, no amount of success in ministry will make up for not doing this right. Okay? So celebrate your family, celebrate your kids. And I do, you might have noticed, I have one more slot available for one more daughter-in-law. I'm going all over the world looking. I will be accepting. My son rides a Harley. He writes worship music, and he is a wealthy businessman. Okay? And I'm taking resumes and applications and bank account information for him to see, okay? He wants to make sure you're a tither. That's his, he's 27. As was mentioned, we did go in 1984, my wife and I, and right now our church meets in Manila in 15 locations around the city. What's really exciting to me is this year, so far this year, first 2 quarters, we've baptized over 8,000 new believers. So far this year. And we have sent Filipino cross-cultural missionaries to more than 24 nations to plant churches in Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia and Pakistan and Bangladesh and Myanmar and Afghanistan and Azerbaijan, also in the West, in San Francisco and Detroit and San Diego and Toronto, and it's really been great to see and be a part of what God's doing. Now, I want to talk about the theme. The theme I was given that's on our is you can get all of that, and it's still empty at the end. Because what happened, the guy being described in Ecclesiastes has burned all of his relational bridges. All of the relationships that should matter have been destroyed. There's no brother, there's no son, but yet there's success. There's growth, there's wealth, there's prestige, there are buildings, there's whatever that means in our world. They've got all of that, but there's no relationships. Now, if we think about growing strong and influential, that's the theme. We've got to think generationally. And I want to look at, real quickly, a quick run through the book of Genesis, okay? I'll teach the whole book of Genesis in the next 5 minutes. How about that? The English Bible, in the English Bible, the book of Genesis has 50 chapters. Okay, 50. But the original writer divided Genesis into 10 sections. Some of those are long, some are short. You know, they didn't have chapter and verse and all of that. So the original book, there were 10 clearly marked sections, some long, some short. And the dividers is this phrase, the English phrase, this is the account of. 10 times in Genesis, this phrase, this is the account of, appears in the English. I don't know in your language what it would say, but in English, this is the account of. For instance, Genesis 11:27 says, this is the account of Terah. And here's what's interesting. Watch what happens. This is the account of Terah. I would expect now to read about Terah's life. But look at God's perspective when he says, I'm about to give you the account of Terah. Look what he does. 6 verses on Terah. 13 chapters about his son Abraham. Wow. Genesis 25:19. This is the account of Isaac. 3 verses about Isaac, followed by 11 chapters about his sons Esau and Jacob. Genesis 37. This is the account of Jacob. What do we get? 1 verse about Jacob. 14 chapters about his sons, primarily about Joseph. You get the picture? 10 times Genesis says, this is the account of. If God were to write the account of my life, this is the account of Steve Murrell. There might be 1 verse about me, and chapter after chapter about William and James and Jonathan, my sons. I think there would also be chapters about my spiritual sons, Ferdy and June and Ariel and Rico and Paulo and Jure and Manny and Gilbert, and the list goes on. God's view of your success is about those you mentor and about the people you leave behind. It's not about you, and it's not about me. But so often we have such a short-term view of success, and we think it's the monuments that physically can be seen and touched and photographed, and somehow that's it. I want to close this thought with a couple of stories. This actually looks about like it. And my dad built this platform. With his bare hands, he built the platform. And then Joe pulled out, see that pulpit he's preaching from? It doesn't look like much, but Joe was so proud of it. With tears in his eyes, he said, my dad gave me this.
If we are going to change the campus so we can change the world, we all need to be changed by a radical revelation of the Father heart of God.
because with love, anything is possible.
You are not a person who is a slave to your DNA. You are not a slave to chemicals or your environment. You will change your environment if necessary, because the Holy Spirit is inside of you.
You walk into adulthood free from slavery, free from bondages, and that you can continue to be an ambassador of Christ in your college and workplace.
If we want to change the world, serve the campus. Use us, Lord! Use us, Lord!
Don't ever cower down or feel intimidated, because at the end of the day, it's not about your strength. It is about the power of God working through people.